On this week's episode of TalkStone,
we recap the two freshest tour stops, HCT Italy and HCT Oakland.
the freshest franchise lead for Hearthstone Esports, Che Chou, joins us to discuss Hunter Ace's dominance in the Hearthstone Masters program.
And as always, we present this week's fresh, well-played moment.
Everybody get in here. Let's break down all the esports action. Welcome to TalkStone, your premier source for all things competitive news and analysis for Hearthstone Esports. My name is Frodan.
I'm TJ.
And yeah, we're back for another episode, TJ. It's episode 3 here officially. So how's your past couple weeks been?
It's been good. Just been watching a lot of Hearthstone. Haven't got to cast anything, but it's kind of been cool sitting on the sidelines and watching. And today we're going to break down two of the tour stops that we've seen recently, Italy and Oakland. And we're going to start off with Italy, and I think the biggest story coming out of Italy, as most people know by now, is that Hunter Ace wins another tour stop. 4 finals appearances and 2 victories in tour stops this year.
That's right.
And a funny little thing is, during the So You Think You Can Cast recording, me and Anthony Vitali, a fellow Hearthstone Esports member, recorded a video for people to cast over. And I made this ridiculous backstory for myself where I said I won like 7 Hearthstone tournaments throughout the year.
Yeah.
Something that I thought would never be achievable by a single player. And Hunter Ace, it's actually looking doable for him. He's still got a while to go before he reaches that ridiculous number, but he's now got 2 under his belt, and he just looks unstoppable right now. I didn't think I would ever see a player have this much success in a single year of Hearthstone.
Yeah, consistency is the name of the game in card games in general. And Hunter Ace has some of the most consistent streak of performances we've seen. I think the only player that can hold a candle to him is quite possibly Pavel from 2016's World Championship, or last call rather, into the end of 2017. And ever since then, Pavel's kind of been on a little bit of a vacation from Hearthstone, just enjoying his life. But, you know, Hunter Ace has kind of picked up where Pavel left off, where it's just every tournament he goes to, he's a very safe pick to go far. His worst performances have been at, like, playoffs. But, I mean, the fact is he still is a very consistent threat. Yeah. Like you said, 4 finals appearances. 2 of them started at the beginning of the year, going to the finals both times at Toronto and at Germany, and then in Seoul and now finally in Italy winning. And then also he qualified for another tour stop to wrap up season 2. He can win 3 tour stops in basically 2 seasons. That's crazy. Yeah,
Tokyo is the one that he'll be participating in, which is a qualifier, so he automatically has top 16 there as well. Just needs to win out a few matches, and he's got himself another finals. But yeah, I think another player to talk about consistency as well in best Hearthstone performances for a year of all time was Firebat, who after he won the World Championship came back and won back-to-back Gfinities.
Yeah, that's right, too. Firebat winning quite. Actually, it's pretty interesting, too. A lot of the world champions did end up having a pretty good streak. Not to mention, we have some, fun stuff too. Like Artosis won the BlizzCon Invitational in 2013. A lot of us joke about him being the original world champion, and then he started doing well in other tournaments after that.
Yeah, and of course, it definitely boosted his casting career.
That's right, man.
All because of the
Hearthstone.
Hearthstone.
He was just a fledgling, kind of underground online caster for some Korean StarCraft League or something.
Yeah.
But we love you, Artosis, if you're listening there, Dan. Speaking of consistency, we go on just circle back here. It's not just Hunter Ace. It's also Tempo Store making quite the run here. Just saying, with another top 4 performance in Seoul and in Italy. So it feels like he's kind of mirroring Hunter Ace's performance, but just a round earlier. And then Muzzy also making it to the top 8, qualifying for Copa. I think HCT is really starting to shine with some of the most dedicated players getting rewarded. And at the same time, too, you look at like F2K's performance across all these tour stops. They're still in the lead for points as a team. So you definitely have these consistent names coming back here because Fino, Boar, and Glacier are definitely killing it as well.
Yeah, I think the new system for tour stops is really starting to reward consistency, and we're seeing it shine through. And the one thing that I want to talk about is sort of the unique skill set that tour stops test. It's not just Hearthstone skill. It's not just building the correct lineup for whatever format you're playing in, whether it's Giant Swiss, Last Year Standing, Conquest, these online qualifiers, which do have a different dynamic amongst them as well. But it's also like the endurance that it takes to play through these. And I think the players that are shining in tour stops are these players that bring all this stuff together. The true veterans of the scene, the guys that are practicing and preparing like nonstop before these events, finding the right lineup, playing well, but not only playing well, but playing well across 24 hours of gameplay in 2 days, in the span of 2 days.
Right, week over week as well.
Yes.
They're traveling to a different continent, different time zones. I have difficulty, handling my Uber to Blizzard to record this podcast. I don't even know how these guys are traveling, 17, 20 hours, have to adjust 9-hour time difference, and then have to submit decks, too, in different lineups. Like, a lot of these guys, Hunter Ace, Muzzy, Saiyan, Boar, they're all submitting different lineups, every different week, so they're really testing their Hearthstone breadth of knowledge as well as their depth.
Yeah.
Some of these guys, when they play week to week, they sometimes just submit the same lineup for the easiness of it. But if you look at how the metagame has shifted, Wishwin meta, especially for tournaments and tour stops, have actually been such a crazy dynamic because 1 week a strategy can work very effectively. For example, in Italy, the aggro decks seem to come out in full force.
Yeah.
A lot of refinement, a lot of pressure. You saw some of these decks that were able to get some big wins. But then you also see some of these control decks or these combo decks or mid-range decks, Malagos Druid, for example, 64% win rate, which is quite possibly the most dominant performance of a deck we've seen all meta.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, Dan, if we take a step back, this is sort of not the dream Hearthstone meta, but it's really healthy. Mm-hmm. If we look at sort of the breakdown for Italy specifically, the lowest represented class was Warrior, and it still had 65 decks.
Wow, that's a fifth of the field.
Submitted, yes. So the lowest represented class was 65, still, a little under 20%, I feel. So it really is, and you never talk about a class as like it's an underdog class. Every single deck has some popular archetype. Like the bottom 3 for Italy was Hunter, Priest, and Warrior. Taunt Warrior we always talk about as a great deck. Control Priest, still very viable in the meta, especially in Oakland, as we'll talk about a little bit later. And then Hunter has Recruit Hunter. Egg Hunter is starting to make an appearance in the
Death
scene.
Rattle Hunter is a real thing.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that in HCT Oakland segment.
That's right. And also, even Hunter Ace won HCT Seoul, which was in the same meta with a mid-range Hunter.
Yeah.
Mid-range sort of
classic mid-range Hunter,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, Houndmaster, Kill Command.
Yeah, that's right. So we're sort of seeing this big diversity, and before we move off of sort of the top 4 and talk about Hunter Ace's victory, I do want to talk about Hunter Ace's lineup and also how he's been innovating with lineups recently.
Okay.
Because Hunter Ace, we have to go back a step and think about what are the main conquest strategies. There's, of course, the target strategy where you try and target a specific deck. All your decks are trying to target something else. There's the good deck strategy where you just bring
what works on ladder. The
4 sort of highest win rate decks overall. Mm-hmm. But then we've started to coin these terms for other types of lineups. There was the Pavel lineup, which was like
just a hybrid.
Hybrid.
Yeah,
it was
two
good decks, and then 2 aggro decks, 2 control decks, or 2 decks that were from the good deck strategy, and then 2 heavy target decks. Mm-hmm. And now we have the Hunter Ace strategy, which I'm going to coin it now.
Okay.
It's going to become a thing. He brings 3 decks that are like very all in on a specific type of strategy, and then 1 deck that just I cannot pinpoint what he's doing. And we're gonna take a look at his Italy lineup to sort of drive home that point.
Sure.
Odd Rogue, Odd Paladin, aggro package. Malagos Druid, which is kind of just in the good decks lineup. It kind of goes with aggro as he showed in Seoul. But then Big Spell Mage. He was the only player in the top 4 with Big Spell Mage, and it seems like it just doesn't fit with his lineup. Huh. And he seems like the only player that's having success with Big Spell Mage in these big tournaments. And so I don't know what it is. It seems like no player can make it into that top run. He seems like he plays the deck well. Where does it fit in this lineup? I don't know, but he won the tournament, Dan.
Yeah, it's interesting because Big Spell Mage is really effective against, the Warlocks. Pretty decent against aggressive board strategies like Odd Paladin.
Yeah.
Some people would argue that Odd Paladin is even or whatnot, but it generally doesn't fit exactly in that lineup. Odd Paladin, Odd Rogue is really supposed to punish those slower decks, like if Miracle Rogue comes out, for example, and you're really trying to pressure it. And Malagos Druid can help win against some of those aggressive strategies as well. So it's a very interesting hybrid approach from Hunter Ace. And more importantly, I just feel like every time I watch this guy, there's at least a couple of times every single series, maybe even every single game, where I'm just like, okay, this looks like the best play here. And he just does something completely differently.
Yeah.
So just like Pavel, it feels like he sees lines and has different, like setups that are different from other players, and it's creating a lot of success. And I think that's really interesting, too, because a lot of the pro players these days, they're very communal with their ideologies. They share their deck list publicly. They talk about strategies after they get their ladder finished. And they even give their tips on stream on how to mulligan, how to play, and some of these secret tech cards that they're playing out. But when you have some guy that's not really focused on streaming or content creation, not really too many people know about him. His practice group is very tight-knit with the Dusky Boys over in EU. When Hunter Ace comes out, he comes out swinging. He's always surprising people. And I think it's largely to do with the fact that he's just independently pioneering his own ideas, his own concepts. And I think, something we'll talk about all episode long is that the more you're in touch with your own strategies and from your own experiences and not necessarily just copying and parroting other people's ideas and taking it at face value, the stronger and a deeper player that you are.
Yeah.
And I really respect Hunter Ace for being able to change it up a little bit, but also stay true to what we know him for, because it's very clear he loves Malygos Druid, for better or for worse.
Yes.
But for a long time, he was known as a control player. So Big Spell Mage isn't that surprising. It's just that surprising that he went with Odd Pal and Odd Rogue again with Big Spell Mage, because he's been playing Big Spell Mage for a long time now.
Yeah, if you look at sort of what would couple with that lineup, you would think even Vardu, who was the runner-up at Italy, who brought the same lineup but with Mind Blast Priest, the control priest, instead of Big Spell Mage, you'd think that fits in the lineup better. And if you look at the win rates for the tournament, Big Spell Mage was at 47% win rate. Barely anybody was having too much success with it, whereas the control priest was at a 55% win rate. And these are really large sample sizes because over 100 people brought both of those archetypes. It's just really interesting that he manages to find these situations where he goes against the grain slightly and is rewarded for it. And HCT Soul was no different, where he went with Malygos Druid in a semi-aggressive lineup. It's kind of the first player to do that. Now we're seeing it become way more popular. And then the mid-range hunter, which barely anybody brought, and nobody was sort of in that top tier with it. So really like what Hunter Ace is doing, and bringing those slow decks, even though the rest of his lineup was aggro, and playing across 9 Swiss rounds or however many it was, is just insane. So, but we can talk a little bit about just general meta stuff now that we've talked about performances.
I'm not done talking about Malygos Druid here.
That was my next point. Malygos Druid, you mentioned earlier, 64% win rate with over 200 games of sample size at HCT Italy.
Yeah, so that is a pretty consistent win rate. Now, granted, the Malygos Druid is still a deck that's even being refined right now. People are subbing out some of those finishing cards. Instead of Faces Manipulator, some people are playing Starfire or Starfall, depending on if you want to play more aggressive or defensive strategies. And I think Malygos Druid is just going to show you all the best parts about Druid, which is its flexibility, its curve, its card draw, its defensive reactive gameplay.
Yes.
And one thing that's really cool about Malygos, if anybody who hasn't tried it and is listening right now, is that it's such a fluid deck. Part of why, we really enjoy playing a game like Hearthstone is that you really want different experiences every time you're playing this game. And Malygos Druid keeps presenting puzzles of how to win the game without Malygos or Twig of the World Tree.
Yes.
Because in tournaments, everyone knows you're playing Malygos Druid compared to Ladder. So if you bring something like Twig of the World Tree and they remove it through a weapon destruction tool, you're often a sitting duck if that's your main game plan. But Malygos Druid is so reactive and so flexible that it can win without these two, quote, win conditions with Twig or Malygos.
Yeah, and I think that's where the big adjustments come in with the deck, right?
Like Tyrannus
for Impact, who we'll talk about later at Oakland. And even just like Alex Straza, it wasn't in the deck for a long time.
Right.
People were all in on Twig, but now Weapon Hate is so popular. Ooze both Oozes, Gluttonous Ooze and Acidic Swamp Ooze, are being played in a lot of decks. And a lot of times, Twig is just like your tertiary win condition. It's not even like your primary or secondary.
It's just 5 damage to the face.
It's just 5 damage to the face. If it gets removed, you still find creative ways. You can Spreading Plague, Branching Paths, set up for Big Burst. Malygos plus Double Moonfire still exists. Still 12 damage to the face.
Right.
You can set up with Alex Straza against decks that can't heal, and then just swipe phase or do anything. Hit for 3. Malfurion hero power over the course of a few turns. So I really like where Malygos Druid is right now. It's probably one of my favorite meta-dominant decks that we've seen.
Yeah.
I do not really miss the days of Raza Priest being the dominant force. I think that Malygos Druid offers so many more unique possibilities to win the game than Raza Priest did. And so I'm happy that it's sort of the most dominant deck because it is still skill-intensive. It's still fun to watch even after you've watched 100 games of it. and it's still being toyed with, not only the deck lists, but also the way you play it. And so I think that I'm happy that Malagos Druid is here to stay.
Absolutely. You can win through board, like Spreading Plague and Branching Paths. You can win through Burst, through Malagos. You can win through big combos, through Faceless Manipulator.
Yeah.
You can win through minion pressure by playing Tyranitus and Lich King. You can win just by Death Knight hero powering them and playing like a burn strategy as if you're mage. And it's so interesting how flexible it is. Either way, we're singing praises of this deck. You should be trying it on ladder. It's very fun, but it does have its own weaknesses, so tread carefully. So with that said, HCT Italy, we kind of talked a lot about Hunter Race and some of the players going through, and then kind of carrying over to HCT Oakland. The metagame shifted so dramatically, and the reason why we kind of are saying that is because what worked in Italy didn't necessarily work in Oakland because players were immediately responding.
Yes.
A lot of players were expecting aggro in Oakland, and so they brought counter aggro strategies. And as a result, Paladin, which was at a pretty strong, like above 50% win rate, like 53, I believe, is the number I see in my spreadsheet here. It went from 53% to the high 30s.
Yes.
37%. That's a 15% drop in percentages, and that's crazy to me, man. Just like Paladin's supposed to be one of the best decks on ladder. People are talking about how Paladin's just like this really insane class right now. It's probably one of the candidates for the, you look at the data spreadsheets and say, oh, Odd Paladin's insane, or, all these variants of it. What happened, TJ?
I don't know, but there was a lot of players who sort of went, like if you look at the top four, Malagos Druid was the most popular, and we talked about how powerful of a deck it is, and it can hold its own against aggro. Spreading Plague pretty much wins you the game against Odd Paladin. So with a lot of these decks that kind of target I'll call it soft aggro, because there's also a hard aggro that'll get into in just a moment, that the soft aggro that can't really burst too heavily, that are board flood decks, not like true aggro decks like Odd Paladin, Odd Rogue. And the Control Priest was another one, which can, Dustbreaker's a hell of a card. And Control Priest was definitely relevant in the top four, with both Impact and Triton bringing that deck.
Yeah.
But a lot of players adjusted the other way. Instead of bringing anti-aggro, they brought the hard aggro.
Right.
Which is like the Yo's Flow lineup, where you bring like Murloc Mage and
hey,
very heavy.
2 episodes ago, you laughed at me for saying Murloc Mage lineup. And Yo's Flow, if he was able to, win one game instead of lose, it was the difference between making potentially top 8,
yeah,
or getting bubbled out.
But that is where a lot of the players that brought that hard aggro stopped at. They got top 16, top 32, and not top 8.
That's still a good lineup,
It's
TJ.
still
top
a good
16
lineup.
Every event is still really impressive.
But it was the difference maker. And I think the big deck from Oakland that people are talking about it now, Quest Rogue and Tare taking the win at a tour stop.
Is it, though, TJ? Because I'm looking at the data, and it seems like Rogue lost a lot. It was one of the worst performing classes, along with Paladin and Mage.
Dan, do not interrupt my confirmation bias, please. Quest Rogue is the best deck in the game. Tare won a tour stop with it. But no, in all seriousness, is Quest Rogue good, or is Tare just a master of Quest Rogue? We talked a lot about with Killin' All Day last week about how his teammates had to really hard convince him not to bring Quest Rogue because it was a bad deck, and now his teammate goes and wins a tour stop with a lot of, kind of a similar meta, but a little bit different because it was a big field and not just 16 players, and he wins it.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show you that timing is just as important as your decision-making itself. Like, what you actually bring is important, but also the timing. Because if you look at Hunter Ace's success, you're like, well, sure, I'll bring Paladin. But then you just get farmed by all the Warlocks, the Druids, and the Shamans out there, that are dedicated to beating all these token flood decks, which also has like a residual compound effect on everything else that floods the board. Because right now we had Zoo Warlock, which everyone had high hopes for dominating the meta. That didn't do too hot. People were hoping Token Druid was like quite possibly the best deck in the game for this current expansion. That's not true anymore, I think. So it's so interesting how week to week, based on how you are observing the other metas, you have this mind game of, should I keep using that formula for success, or is it going to shift dramatically? And if it's shifting, do I counter what people are going to be shifting to do, or should I just play the level 1 strategy of just beat what was good last week?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of mind games to it, and I think in the end, Tare, when he was giving his winter interview, just said that contrary to what people believe, he doesn't always play Quest Rogue just because he likes it. He thinks it's actually just really good still.
Yeah.
And when you watch him play it, it still looks really good.
It does.
I've seen, like, it's very close a lot of times. Like, he was playing Control Priests, where in the past Questrogue just, completely slammed Control Priests, and it wasn't even close. He still went down to, like 3 health, 2 health, but he still won very convincingly by the end of it. And it didn't feel like he was under any pressure at one point.
Yeah.
And things like that is what really makes the difference between Questrogue players. If you're really good at it, you win convincingly a lot of times. And if you don't, you kind of, like, die way before you can get anywhere close. You die with, like, a prep, a Vicious Scalehide, and a Youthful Brewmaster. Like, what else can I do here?
Yeah.
And then I look at Teray, and I'm just like, well, what can he do? And then 10.5 turns later, he wins.
And the biggest thing about Teray and Questrogue specifically, it's not about how you play the matchups you're supposed to beat. It's about how you win the matchups that you're not supposed to beat.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Atari's strengths really lie. Because of his experience with the deck, playing it for so long, he can actually consistently win against aggro decks. Mm-hmm. And I believe he did it. I think one of his opponents was Yotzflow.
Yeah, right. Yotzflow was like, I should have won that match.
I should have won that match, and you look at all the numbers, he should have overwhelmingly won that match.
Right.
He could have just played, like, he should have swept Questrogue. He had like 65% matchups against Questrogue across the board. Granted, hard to look at numbers for Questrogue since there's not a big sample size, but
I made this joke on broadcast, I think, 3 times, but when we were looking at the data to compare, like, oh, should he be banning, like, Questrogue, or should he be banning one of his other control decks, like Shutterwalk Shaman? And I was like, well, there's only like 100 games in the data sample size. That's probably Killen and Teray's, like, data tracker, deck tracker. That's like probably their games that are contributing to the sample size. No one else feels like they're playing Questrogue. I think a few other people did, like Vince, and he also did pretty well. Mm-hmm. Either way, Questrogue, definitely a deck to be feared, but I think it's like a fundamental symptom of the metagame, which is there's a lot of greed. Lot of greed. And aggro decks aren't as good at punishing that greed compared to maybe some of these combo decks.
That's right.
And you kind of look at the Death Rattle Hunter that comes into the mix as well, because it's very similar to Recruit Hunter, where you put out a bunch of really big beasts and threaten your opponent, but you can do it with Devilsaur Egg and Terror Scale, or Terror Night Stalker, or Terror Scale Stalker. Excuse me. Like, you're able to get these 5/5s out really quick and punish your opponent for wild growth ramping. So, there's a lot of opportunity in the metagame, largely because it's centered around this slow dominance of defensive decks. And if you just have some kind of way to swing tempo, have power curves at any juncture of the game before your opponent can set up their big power swings, you have an opportunity. So that's why the metagame is evolving, and it's very beautiful to watch it unfold.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because there's still room in the meta, especially with Zoo Warlock becoming super popular on ladder right now. That deck didn't really exist 2 weeks ago, right? And that's a deck that can punish greed. It can punish the turn 2 wild growth, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Because you play turn 2 wild growth, they play Voodoo Doctor, double Happy Ghoul.
6/6 worth of stats sometimes.
Yeah, so, and if you look at Tare's lineup, which he won Oakland with, it's all combo decks. Well, essentially, Cube Warlock, Shutterwalk Shaman, Malagos Druid, and Questrogue. Yeah. They're all combo decks in a sense, but they're also all decks that have a decent amount of anti-aggro tools. Malagos Druid with Spreading Plague. Questrogue, I mean, you can argue that it doesn't really have any, but Vanish, Vicious Scalehide, it has a lot of stabilization tools once you get to those 4/4s. And then Shutterwalk Shaman, Volcano, Lightning Storm, Life Drinker, Q-Block, Hellfire Defile, like, they all can beat the aggro lineups and crush the control lineups. And so I like where that spot is, but this lineup probably would not have won Italy.
Yeah, or Tour Stops before it.
So it's, you can't look at it, in a general sense. You have to look at it in the context of the tournament, and I like the read that Teray made. It's crazy to me, because Teray is a very successful player, has multiple championships under his belt, a lot of top 16s and top 8s at playoffs, top 16s, top 8 at tour stops. Yeah. But he's still, I want to account to nerves, but he still makes crucial errors in big situations. And it was no different in Oakland. Yeah. He had one game where he forgot about Sandbinder Battlecry, filled up his hand with Grumble after playing Shutterwalk, and he burned the extra copies of Shutterwalk that he would have had. And he had that game in the bag. It was a 100% win rate, nearly, if he had just been patient, waited, and guaranteed that he got extra Shutterwalks in his hand.
Yeah. Same thing with the Malagos Druid Mirror in the finals.
That's right, yeah.
His opponent had Tarantis for multiple turns, and he was doing such a good job deflecting his pressure. And then just kind of said, you know what? I have 2 more mana. Instead of gaining 3 life with Malfurion's Death Knight hero power, I'm just going to cycle in case I can get a little bit more damage because I'm safe at 37 health, which sounds right until his opponent just had like a 6-card combo with Innervate, 2 Branching Paths, Moonfire, like Naturalize, all this crazy stuff.
And it's not a game knowledge thing. It's not anything. He's a great player. Just sometimes he'll set himself up perfectly. He'll make all the right plays, and then he'll make like a crucial mechanical error. And I want to say it's nerves. He's a very shaky guy. He looks, he obviously gets nervous when he's in these big matches, but he puts himself in those positions so well. He always does well in the first 6 rounds of Swiss. When he's not on broadcast, there's less pressure.
We could be very real here. I got a chance to talk to Teray too. He just said, I just forgot about this possibility. I wasn't thinking about these card possibilities. And when you play so many games of Hearthstone for so many hours at a time, it's just difficult to keep track of everything. Let's not try to mask it. It's very exhausting sometimes to play so many rounds and go that deep. We ended at 10 p.m., but we started at 11 a.m. that day. And
12 hours back to back. Yeah.
So, and of course they wake up and they practice a little bit beforehand or they talk about it in between games. The nice thing, too, that Teray ended with the winning interview was he was saying that he feels like he couldn't really get over this hump without the support of his friends and his team.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that was really nice to highlight as well because Teray said in 2014 when he made the World Championships, he was kind of a loner. He just practiced on his own, played ladder. Now he's like, Killen made the World Championships. He's one of my closest friends. He's my best friend in Hearthstone. I loved watching him succeed, and now he's here cheering me on, and I succeeded. And I'm like, this is just a really nice bromance going on here. And I think that's a really interesting segue because I saw that a lot happen in Oakland. Like, there's just a lot of team camaraderie that's happening because one of the big races that's also happening is not just for playoffs, not just for World Championships, but also the team standings to wrap up Season 2, TJ.
That's right.
And there's 2 teams that are neck and neck with Tempo Storm and F2K, Fate to Karma. They're basically switching spots between first and second every other tour stop.
Yeah, and Temple Storm with Amnesiac and Sand both taking top 32s at Oakland. They lock 8 points for Temple Storm. Right. Fino taking a top 16, so locking 6 points for F2K. It is neck and neck, and we did the math before. Muzzy is qualified for Tokyo, which is the last tour stop of Season 2, and he's guaranteed a top 16. With just the top 16 points, which is the 6, they tie F2K.
Right.
So
if Muzzy just loses and bombs out of Tokyo, we have a tied first place.
Tied first place. But if he manages to make it to top 8, his performance alone pushes Tempo Storm into that first place.
By 2 points.
By 2 points. Of course, he can get further if he makes top 4 or wins the whole thing, but that's cool to see.
I do want to say one more thing about teams.
Okay.
As a small anecdote, I was watching a lot of the team members watch their other team members. So I'm like watching, F2K watch Fino's game. I'm watching Temple Storm watch Amnesiac's game. And the amount of stress and tension and drama that goes on, that's never caught on camera. That's never tweeted about. That's never talked about on camera by the casters really. It's just you see so much support and relief, and it's very interesting. It's really cool to watch. It's almost like, a coach watching their tennis player when they meet, they hug and they're stressed out. I saw Amnesiac round 8 just taking down some guy, and Amnesiac was on the borderline of being eliminated because I think he was 4-3.
4-3, yeah.
And you just saw the relief wash over him while he takes a deep breath, sighs, and hugs Sand. And I'm like, dude, this was just a best of 5. In most other tournament cases prior to 2018, didn't even matter.
Yes.
But now because of these team standings, they're watching their opponents play. You see the camaraderie and the brotherhood really come together with some of these guys here. It's just really cool to watch it, and I wish we could capture it all. That's why Nicole and her team with the tour should have been at that tour stop filming that stuff because it was really powerful stuff. Just watching people get closer because of that, and to do it with their friends. It's a really special thing. So if you guys ever make it out to a tour stop, try to at least bring somebody with you, even if they're not necessarily participating. I saw a lot of people bring friends who were casually onlooking, and it just enriches the experience 10 times over for a lot of these people.
Yeah, bringing people together.
Yeah.
What a fantastic experience.
All right, well, all cheesy and campiness aside here, it's time for meme history.
The meme for this week, for episode 3, is the one-pack curse.
Ooh, this one dates a couple years back now. And the reason why we do this again is to explain to you guys some of the inside jokes in the community that people might not understand if they're new to competitive Hearthstone. But the one-pack curse all began with a very good initiative from Blizzard called Choose Your Champion, where if you vote for a player, the further they go in that tournament, the more packs you receive based off their performance. And it started in 2016 when people were seeing some of their favorite players, who's probably one of the most popular content creators on the planet for Hearthstone, and Tice, when he made another World Championship in a row. It was his second World Championship appearance, so a lot of people were hyped for this guy.
Yeah.
The stream was taking off, and they all, like overwhelmingly vote percentage, went to Tice out of the 16 players in the World Championship, which unfortunately he bombed out early and only got one pack for his fans. And then that was continued on when in 2017, the first season, Pavel, after winning the World Championship in the Winter Championship, he went up against Doc Pone and lost and only got one pack, so people were calling him Pockful. And then, go down to the Summer Championship where Pavel went once again, was not able to deliver the packs. And the World Championship, people were picking Kalento, who did well in the Spring Championships. And then, Pack Lento curse was born because he couldn't get out of groups. And then what happened in Summer Championship, TJ?
And the reason why we're doing this all is because the Summer Championship, the most recent one, overwhelmingly, Dog was chosen.
Yes.
For the packs, the representative of everybody's packs on the line, and Dog bombed out.
Yep.
So Dog carries on the one pack curse.
Yes. And
who will it be in the future? I do not know.
I don't understand, TJ. There's this weird linear graph where the more popular you are, it's a descending graph.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it on this camera, but the more popular you are, the less packs you end up getting for your
right.
fans. So, if there's a moral of the story is, we don't necessarily believe in superstitions or curses, but for now, someone has to break the curse. It can't keep going on like this. But be careful who you vote for. Don't just vote for the name that you recognize the most.
We hope that this edition of Meme History makes Hearthstone a more inclusive place for everybody.
Hey, TJ. Nice meme. All right, TJ, it's time for the well-played moment, where we pick one moment that stands out above the rest, and that was quite possibly the most well-played.
Dan, we're already going to break a rule this week. It's episode 3, and we're already going against the grain. We're not picking one moment this week. We're picking one player, and that player is Quachi.
Okay, all right, Quachi.
Top 32 from HCT Oakland.
Oh, you're jumping the gun. We're going to the ending. Spoiler alert.
Okay, spoiler alert.
Top 32.
Spoiler alert. He did it.
He did it.
But how did he do it, Dan?
So when Oakland was first announced, man, a lot of people who are very competitive all booked their tickets. But some people who are local and casual Hearthstone players that just want the competitive experience also signed up to see how far they can go. And one such player was Brian Kibler's biggest fan, Quachi, who decided to bring Malagos Druid, great choice, 64% win rate, Elemental Mage featuring their most recently buffed Mountain Giant, a Test Rogue that steals your opponent's class cards and hope that you don't queue into other rogues, and then you have Overload Concede Giant Shaman that you try to use Overload and the Spell Stone to create big wide boards that they can't remove.
Yeah.
And he somehow went 6-3 and got top 32 at number 32, pushing out players like Muzzy and half of F2K and some of these other players who go to every single tour stop.
Now, he did have sort of a highlight reel that made it all the way to Reddit.
Or a
that
low
was
light reel, depending on how you view it.
Sure. Where he was playing against PNC in round number 4. Both players 3-0, so looking really good in the Swiss rounds. And we didn't know who Quachi was. We just knew that he was bringing this crazy lineup.
Oh, yeah.
And he did have some blunders in that match. Some pretty big blunders in that match.
Some interesting choices. And I think one of the funniest things was I think before the game really got deep, I said, whoever picked this match, good job. I said that to the production team on broadcast. Because I said, good job, man. This is an awesome lineup to feature against a really good player. Boy, did I not know what I was signing up for, man. If you guys did not watch it, go back and watch that match. Quachi versus PNC, really funny. But the reason why we paid this is well played, because all jokes aside, is that it really shows you that two things. One, something that we've been talking about all episode long. Hunter Ace, Teray, and some of these other guys, they just bring their own lineups. They have their own styles, their own strategies in their own mind that they know they want to execute. So they're playing what they like to play and what they think would work that's not conforming to what is traditionally the norm. So that's also. And the second point is that it's also showing how this meta has blossomed beautifully that we're talking about. Because it's so greedy, it's so wide and diverse that you can have room to bring these really wacky off-the-wall decks.
And, I mean, we call it well played. He did have some moments that weren't that well played.
He had to go 6-3. That means he had to beat 6 good players.
He had to go 6-3, which means especially in later rounds, he was playing against players that are pro Hearthstone players that play full-time, that brought super meta decks that are, have been tested and defined for a long time, and he beat them. So even though on his first broadcasted matches of probably his entire career, and him bringing a lineup that he just thought was cool because he saw Brian Kibler play it, he still managed to defeat some really good players with this crazy lineup. Blew the meta wide open, Dan. Well, at least I'd like to think. And so that's why.
I think so. I've played a lot of Test Rogue, TJ, and let me tell you, that deck, it's really hard to win with, and he had to win with it a handful of times, or it got banned.
Yes.
So, it's so funny that your opponent's banning, really weird decks on paper because they don't know how to play against it. They didn't even prepare for it. It wasn't even on their radar when they're considering, well, these are the 20 decks we have to be careful about. And then, someone brought Elemental Mage, with Ruby Spellstones and really weird stuff. How do I counter that? You don't really know what to mulligan for, even though it's open deckless, and that's the beauty and why we think it was well played. All right, well, that was our well-played moment. Here's our well-produced minute. Check this out. I don't know. TJ, why don't you do something?
He's the 2017 Hearthstone World Champion!
This will be, I think, the first APAC tour stop for Season 2. I am cheering for Staz.
最大改变就是好像突然很多人都在台湾的人都认识。
It's a bunch of smart, cool people that you want to hang out with.
Gia, you need to tell us where's good.
Follow your nose.
The way the decks line up, I don't think he ever gets there is the thing.
That's it. That's gonna do
oh
it.
Oh my gosh.
Took a little bit of a risk there.
All right, guys, welcome back to TalkStone. We're joined in studio by our special guest today, franchise lead for Hearthstone Esports, Che Chou. What's up, Che?
Hey, Dan. My son.
I love that joke.
Always great to hear that. Che, actually, before we get even, into our conversations for today, why don't you go ahead and talk a little about your role as franchise lead?
Yeah. So, global franchise lead for Hearthstone Esports. It's just a fancy way of saying I manage the team that manages all of our esports programs, and so I oversee everything from strategy to team management of all of our stuff, as well as work across the company with our leadership team on where to take Hearthstone Esports next.
Cool. So you're DJ's boss, right?
Yeah, I'm still your boss, right? Okay, yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Last I checked.
All right, great. What are you playing these days in Hearthstone?
I'm playing a lot of recruit decks, actually, mostly picked up by people I see on stream. I've been watching a lot of Zalay. So Recruit Warrior, I started messing with my own variant of the Recruit Warrior with some Woe Cleaver action. And then Recruit Hunter, and then there's the cube version of that. And so I'm playing around with those things.
And this is real progress, because when I first started in the Hearthstone Esports team, every time I would watch Che play, he would be playing Priest. And the only stream he watched back then was Zedalot. So this is a lot of progress.
Yeah, but Zedalot is off-meta, high-legend Priest player. I mean, come on, you got to respect that. I mean,
you do.
In any meta, right? So, yeah.
But then Che realized that things were starting to get busier. He didn't have time to play 30-minute matches anymore.
That's right.
So
That's right.
he just had to start beating people down.
We have Che here today to talk about the Hearthstone Masters program a little bit more in depth for you guys to understand it, why we're doing it, and more importantly, just some of his thoughts on the system now that we're almost halfway or more than halfway throughout the year.
And we're about to hit a big milestone, too, with Hunter Ace, currently just a few points shy of 150. So he's almost in that first tier of Hearthstone Masters. He could lock it in with a good finish at Tokyo. So we're close to where all that stuff is going to start coming into the picture.
Yeah, in fact, Hunter Ace is, as far as I know right now, on vacation in Italy with his family, and he shared a picture on social media. It looked beautiful, and I texted him. I said, hey, enjoy your time off. You totally deserve it.
He's probably playing Hearthstone while he's on vacation, right? As much Hearthstone as he can, at least.
Probably, yeah.
So, Che, let's go. Before I start diving into the questions, let me just explain the Hearthstone Masters tier system to anybody who's never heard of it. At the beginning of 2018, Masters tier benefit system was announced where at certain point thresholds at 150, 175, and 200. You unlock certain incentive and bonuses on top of just normally getting prize money and prestige. So at 150, you get 1-star master, where you get invited to monthly online tournaments and end of the year commemorative swag to just kind of show that you were able to get into there. But at the top of it, at 200, 3-star masters, you get direct invite to seasonal playoffs. You get $2,500 appearance bonuses, up to 3 events per season, so kind of like paid appearances to go to events, and of course on top of the other bonuses that we just mentioned. So Che, talk to us about why you guys created the system, what it's trying to accomplish, and more importantly, how have you seen the progress been so far this year?
Sure. So from the outset, we worked on the Master System last year, primarily driven out of feedback from the community. In large part, the feedback was, hey, we're having, we like playing HCT, but it's unsustainable for us as pros to play, and we want more guarantees in terms of sort of performance and reward. And so when we looked at our system, and we actually went through, and TJ was a part of this effort last summer. We went through and we data mined of all of our players over the last couple of years who have made playoffs. How did they get there? How did they score their points? And we looked at sort of the model, and we decided that there's like a group of players who are consistently sort of hitting this level, getting the playoffs every season. And it's actually the reality of playoffs, and the way it's structured is it's pretty harsh. If you get to playoffs, it's a huge accomplishment for you. But if you don't break through to that quarterfinals match and you don't make it on to a championship, life can be pretty hard to get reset all the way back to zero, try another season where you have to grind all the way back to playoffs. So and so what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that those who are consistently getting there are actually being recognized and rewarded, as well as, to basically create a tier, which internally, we call it a gravy train, is if you get there, ideally, all you have to do is sort of maintain your status, win matches, but you shouldn't have to grind super hard to get back to the place that you were to play at that level against those level of opponents. So the idea was, let's see if we can create a sustainable ecosystem for our pro players, or our most dedicated players, our most performant players, and get them to a place where they're constantly being recognized and rewarded for their efforts and their success. The other big reason also was that we recognized that, it is tied into the last thing I said, Hearthstone as a game, obviously any card game with variants, it's just, it's not everything's purely under your control at all times in terms of, you could be very skillful, but you could also have a bad hand, a bad draw. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to show that Hearthstone as a strategy game, it is a game of skill that's proven out over many games. You need a large sample size of games to actually say that you're the better player than this other player, because by winning one best of 5 series, that doesn't actually say, hey, you're definitively better. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to give our player base a lot of competitive opportunities, as well as an opportunity for them to prove themselves over a large sample size of competition. Hence, the Master System, as well as what you guys see now, is also tour stops. Is instead of just grinding online cups or ladder, we want to create a lot of sort of mini pressure cooker tournaments that will determine winners over and over again, so that we can prove, okay, these are the most performant and consistent players. Just like now we're seeing, Hunter Ace, obviously the standout story, because he's done amazing. Honestly, I think internally we didn't expect a person to hit 1 star by as close as we are right now to at the end of season 2. So, but super encouraged right now seeing the likes of Fino, Yarla, Shaxi, Muzzy, Cyan, and those guys as well, kind of hot on the heels of Hunter Ace, about to probably hit our first 1-star Masters players. And so we're definitely keeping an eye on it, and we're encouraged that there are players that are already this high, but so far so good.
Sure. I do want to follow up on some of the points you made. One of them, I think, was the initial feedback that people were concerned whether or not people will hit 3-star Masters at all throughout the entire year. And after Season 1 finished, there were 8 people that would even make 1-star Masters based off the 50-point threshold. Assuming you get 50 points every season, you get 150, you get the baseline requirements for 1-star Master. There's only 8 people that did that. So it seems like it's a very exclusive club. Now that we've seen Season 2 basically wrap up here, what are your thoughts on some of those concerns from people that not many people are going to be able to hit 3-star, let alone 1-star master?
Yeah, no, that's and I get asked. We as a team, I think, get asked that a lot. These thresholds with not just masters, but obviously also for playoffs. The sort of right now the 45 points. I think our general thought there is that we created this system with the steady state in mind, as opposed to sort of this. I mean, right now we're ramping up to the steady state, and we anticipated that it might take us 12 months to get to a place where we have a population of masters.
Before you go on, what does steady state exactly mean?
By steady state, I mean where we think we'll be once the system is up and running and everyone has had 3 seasons worth of points to add up.
Gotcha.
Right, so because we start with 0, we intentionally did not launch a program with. Hey, for instance,
retroactively points.
Exactly. For instance, why don't we make the best players from 2017 Masters already?
Yeah.
Because we felt like, from an integrity standpoint, it would be unfair. Because people would just say, well, we didn't know about that. We would have tried harder, right? So, so what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a system and project out, okay, well, once we have 3 seasons of sort of this this new point system. What do we think the population was going to be? And so we started with a population of sort of a forecasted population, and then we worked out the sort of the points model based on that. So right now at 150 points for a 1-star master, that is, we don't know what we don't know, but that's sort of our forecast that we're putting out there. I think the first group of players hitting that sort of going into season 3 is interesting, but I think to your point, if it's too high, too unattainable, too intimidating, we will re-examine sort of that point structure and go from there.
But you want it to be exclusive, right? You don't necessarily want it to be hundreds of people in a 3-star master.
Right.
It seems like in the system, because we have, from my take on it, it seems like masters is a way to differentiate. And kind of create stratas of players based off their performances, so that way we can easily interpret who's been performing the best out compared to their peers. Because in Hearthstone, it's a little bit hard sometimes to compare. A lot of people have made top 8s and top 16. How can you delineate who's actually been more consistent?
And having a definitive list of who's the best in the world, right, is a big one. Like saying we always have these weird conversations of, well, who's the best in the world? Well, right now this guy won the last championship, so is he the best in the world? But having the Masters list gives us that list. And also on Che's last point, the sort of steady state, Season 2 was the first season, sort of, that we had a championship in the previous season, where in sort of that new points model. So championships is a big bunch of points.
Right. There's more events and more ways to get points in Season 2 than Season 1.
Exactly.
So we shouldn't use Season 1 as just an indicator, because there's more opportunities to get points, there's more months to ladder, there's more tour stops to compete in, championships. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, the idea is that, okay, well, now that you are on, you have this momentum as a Masters player, and imagine that you do make championships. Now you just have more points to kind of maintain your status. Just by going to playoffs, right? So, so I think there's a bunch of points that aren't captured today, and in the steady state, those points would be just a whole part of the economy.
I do want to ask a couple more follow-up questions, because I think 3-star Masters just sounds great. It's the highest tier. You get an invite to playoffs. What about things like this online tournaments with cash prizes? How's that going to look once we see some of our Masters get set based off this tier system?
Yeah, so that's something that we're planning on right now. I mean, obviously we don't have any Masters players yet, but even once we do,
it's like, just Hunter Race. Guess what? You win the tournament. You're the only 1-star master.
Literally, I was like, hey team, now that we're starting to get our first Masters players, how many players do we need to run a Masters tournament? Right? Like, it's like literally could it be 2 people? Like,
just a show.
So yeah, exactly. So
I
so
remember this conversation.
Exactly. So we're looking at that right now. But the idea is, it's whether or not we create content out of this or a broadcast, I think the idea is to give our Masters players more opportunities to compete, and really just to play for more money and have those opportunities. And so whether or not it's a broadcast or a show that we put on, I think we're definitely going to do it, and we'll have more to announce soon.
Gotcha. Cool. Do you have any ideas for your commemorative swag? Because I have some suggestions.
Oh yeah, like what?
Yeah,
we have a lot of ideas, but I'm curious to see.
Masters headband, that they put on so they could wear it, kind of like sumo wrestling style, where they have to tie it really epically. Like there's some martial artists.
Can we? Maybe it's like a Masters hat, but it comes with a mullet. and they can
A toupee, a Hearthstone Masters toupee, so that
Yeah.
way they can block out all the noise, and it's kind of like sunglasses, but it's natural hair.
I'm pretty sure my WWE Championship belt was vetoed as like one of the first ideas that was vetoed.
All right, well, we'll call that a work in progress. But thanks for so much for joining us for the Hearthstone Masters Breakdown. I'm sure as the year progresses, maybe you can have you on back again to have a review of the program. But in the meantime, we also want to do a guest segment now that you're here that we started with Killen in the previous episode.
All right. Now it's time for Would You Buy This Deck? This is a segment, Che. We did it with...
By the way, I don't know what's about to happen. So, like, literally,
Me neither.
Yeah.
I'm hosting this.
Okay.
I don't either, and I'm the one who made the deck. Well, actually, I want to start by saying that the original deck idea did not come from me. I saw it perusing Twitter the other day by a player named Curdy Wordy, who got a top rank. He posted this on his Twitter the other day. Top 100 currently. Well, maybe not currently, this as of a few days ago. It's a Togwaggle Druid, but it's not. Togwaggle is almost its only win condition. It runs Innervate, Moonfire, Barkskin, which is a 1-mana card, gain 3 armor, give a minion plus 3 health. Claw, Earthen Scales, Dispel Stone, Naturalize. Here's the kicker: Lorewalker Cho.
I was hoping for Skulking Ghost,
Yeah.
just to destroy half your deck.
Wild Growth, Wild Pyromancer, Wrath, Ferocious Howl. Basically, it's all armor gain, removal, and cheap spells. And the goal of the deck is to use Lorewalker Cho to fill your opponent's hand up with cheap spells, and then Togwaggle so they don't get the ransom card, so they can't switch their deck back. And since you use so much Cycle with Gadgets and Auctioneer and cheap spells, you have very little cards in your deck, so when you switch with your opponent, you're giving them a bunch of useless stuff, probably not much of it.
And they mill the
the ransom card,
Yeah.
so they can't switch their deck back.
Seems
All right, at first glance, Shay, before I try to convince you, would you buy this deck?
for all of 6,920 dust.
6,920 dust.
Would I buy this deck?
I'm looking for a 15% stake in my company for 1,500 dust.
When you first showed this deck, it was interesting because I just had this conversation with Dan actually last weekend because he was
Togwaggle Druid conversation.
Yes.
You guys are talking about Togwaggle Druid without me.
He texted me and said, "What do you think about this Togwaggle Druid?" And I actually gave him some tips.
Yeah, no, I was like, "Hey Dan, like how?"
Hey son.
Hey son, happy birthday! And also, how do I win with the Mildred? Because I net decked it, and people were talking about this deck is bonkers. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna learn it, and Dan actually walked me through the win conditions, and then I started. I got my first sort of combo win. It felt amazing.
It does feel amazing.
It's I'm not so consistent with it yet, but so I would say that this deck is even more situational and less consistent.
It's really good against even Warlock.
All right, Che. I think I have to sell you a little bit further now.
Okay.
So the reason why I like this deck is because against control, your win condition is set. You have effectively one win condition that's switching their deck and beating them with fatigue because you're not giving them any cards. So it's pretty set in stone, and they never expect Lorewalker Cho. So control, easy, in the bag. Now the kicker with this deck is that it's also good against aggro. Reason being is because Wild Pyromancer. Wild Pyromancer and Barkskin is a sick combo because you're increasing the health of your Wild Pyromancer.
Right.
And so you can go off with a bunch of your cheap spells.
That's right.
And I have fatigued Zoo Warlocks with this deck and won.
Sick.
Wow.
It is,
okay.
it takes some patience because you have so much armor gain. You have to be a little bit patient with some of your removal. Like you can wait a few turns and take like 20 damage in order to get them to commit more to your Wild Pyromancer turn.
So in a control let's say it's late game control.
Yes.
You're like, okay, it's time to go, and the go time is you drop Lone Walker at
2
mana, and then you start dropping cheap spells to fill up their hand.
And then you play Togwaggle on the same turn. The reason being is because you can innervate out more cheap spells. So
So ideally, save your innervates and your 1-mana spells, and then play Togwaggle on the same turn.
Wouldn't you want to play Twig of the World though to get more mana to do that, or not?
Jay, do not try and improve this deck.
They are playing more oozes.
And also, you know what other people are playing? Skulking Geist. But there's still a way to win with Skulking Geist. You just got to keep your 0-mana spells. You got to hold on to your Innervates and your Moonfires. You can still beat them even if they Skulking Geist because you can have Lorewalker Cho plus 4 spells plus Naturalizes. So if you think about it, Lorewalker Cho, double Innervate, a Moonfire, and a Naturalize. you're filling their hand up with like 6 cards that turn, plus the natural draw. Well, the natural draw is going to be burned because they're at 10, and then you King Togwaggle. You can still beat Skulking Geist. This deck has 0 weaknesses. 0 weaknesses.
Okay, what's your win rate on this then, or what is your record?
So I played seven games. I'm 5-2.
Okay.
And this is around rank 600 to 700 Legend.
Did you see a lot of aggro?
A lot of Zoo, yeah.
Okay.
I am 2-1 against Zoo. In the 2 games that I won against Zoo out of the 3, you can tell half my games were against Zoo out of the 7-game sample size nearly.
TJ's just trying to justify his lunch breaks to his boss.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually want to try this now because I know
So
luckily
So Che,
I have all the cards.
Che,
yes.
would you buy this deck?
I would buy it.
Well, yeah, he already has Togwaggle Druid. All he has to do is craft Lore
No,
Walker
but imagine. Well, yeah, 6,000 dust. It's almost 7,000 dust. I don't know. If I were a new player,
that is a bargain.
If it were like my other son, if he was just starting to play, I would be like, son, don't play this deck.
Wait, you have more sons?
There's brothers you don't even know about.
Oh no!
My son.
So
this is Joe's not watching.
The final answer is Che would buy this deck, but he would not buy it for his son.
Right. Exactly.
Not buy it for this son.
Yeah.
Actually, this son might know how to play it, but my other son's not so much.
So we'll walk him through.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Family effort.
I think that was a success, Dan. It was a much bigger success than last week with Killing All Day, who would not buy my deck.
Yeah, maybe next wew I'll try some.
Yeah, but he's a power player. He's like, I want to win. I'm like,
this deck wins.
You'd be surprised.
No, I'm like, I'll like watch his delay, and I'm like, oh, he's playing an odd druid, odd taunt druid. I'm gonna net deck the odd taunt druid, and I just play whatever Zalay plays these days. So, you know.
All right, TJ, we finally got someone to buy a deck, so we're 1-1 over 2 episodes. Hope to improve on that record. Also, just to encourage you guys to experiment more, because this is definitely the kind of expansion meta that you guys should be experimenting a lot, even this late into the content cycle.
That's right, as Quachi taught us.
That's what I was gonna say. I like your conversation about Quachi because like that's sort of the stuff we encourage. We want to see diversity lineups, right? So,
and results.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so that's it about for us today. I want to thank my co-host TJ for, of course, hosting this alongside me, and Che, our special guest. Thanks for joining us. I know you're a really busy guy.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, so what's coming up next for us, TJ? Where are we going to be seeing you next?
Not much. Just working on Hearthstone Esports, and again, as I said last week, my son is due in a couple weeks, so I'll still be on TalkStone. Don't worry, this is pretty close to home, but I'll be pretty busy with that.
Also, I just want to say happy HGG debut week.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Yeah, so very excited for the matches.
For sure.
All right, Che, if people want to follow up more and find out more about you online, what do they do?
I'm on Twitter at Chespace, CHESPACE, and I usually just post about Hearthstone, so that's safe. And then any comments, anything at all, any feedback about Hearthstone Esports, we always read at HS Esports, which is our official Twitter account. So encourage our followers to find us there.
Great. So I'll be sending my Masters to pay idea over to that Twitter. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's been a really fun episode. We're here every other Wednesday at 6 p.m. at twitch.tv/playhearthstone. But if you guys missed any other part of the episode, you can check us out on YouTube as well for the VOD. Or if you want the audio-only version for the podcast, you can check it out on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Google Play. And if you guys missed any other thing about HCT and you want some news in general, you go to playhearthstone.com/esports. And, of course, we'll be back in a couple weeks with yet another episode of TalkStone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.